as we're discussing accuracy, a big issue on the course would be, what's the wind doing? The wind causes more problems throwing the disc than any throw. If you have bad mechanics, the wind will let you know. If you're throwing and you don't have a good wrist down and your wrist is coming up, the wind is going to let you know that you threw it with your wrist up, because it's going to just snowplow. It's going to come out of your hand, the wind's going to lift it, and it isn't going to go anywhere. It's just going to crash. So it's real important to pay attention to the wind when you're throwing the disc. You can get away with stuff if there's no wind. You know, if you throw the disc kind of like up a little bit and there's no wind, you know, it's still going to push forward. It's just not going to fly the correct flight path of the disc. So it's imperative to make sure you always throw with the wrist down, not up. You can see how the disc comes up on the nose. That's the wrist is up. So it should come down. It's not very comfortable at first, but after you get throwing like that, you know, you'll get used to just having that wrist down when you grip your disc. But picking the correct disc for the conditions you are playing in is very important. Here in Maui at this course in Kahului, it's very windy. You got to throw discs that are very overstable. You got to throw a disc that you could throw into the headwind and the wind can't throw it offline. If you throw a flippy disc into the headwind, it can flip it and turn it to the right. So you need a disc that can fly into the headwind and then hold its line, land straight, or turn left. So you know, you want to eliminate the disc that wants to flip. My rock, I throw a rock. Well, I have a bunch of rocks. I like these. These are great discs for learning the rock. So this rock is the DX plastic. So it gets really beat up, but the disc likes to fly to the right now. So I was looking for a disc that I could throw and it will turn to the right. So I like the rock. But the thing about the rock is if you throw it into a headwind, you know, it can flip on its own because it's so flippy, it'll flip and just fly to the right. So for me to throw this disc into a wind, I have to throw it on a hyzer from down here, and then I got to let the disc roll back up to flat, and then it'll turn to the right and fly to the right. But I have to control it, because if I throw it into the headwind will instantly flip it. If I throw it flat, it'll just flip it and it's going to go to the right where I don't want it to go. So if I want to control this one into a headwind, come from a hyzer where it's low on the outside edge is low, the disc will roll up flat and then turn because it's so flippy. So then the other discs that I like to throw as mid-ranges are overstable. The Gator is one of the most overstable mid-ranges Innova makes. Then I like to throw the Cayman because it's very overstable but doesn't overly hook at the end. It can actually, you know, the Gator comes in to a headwind and it will finish left hard. Then I could throw the Cayman into the headwind and it will just come offline a little bit and land forward. And then I like to throw the Pig because it'll hold the line, and a lot of times I can get it just to land straight into a headwind. You know, I can get this one straight, that one turns a little bit, and then the Gator hooks really hard. So all those are going to go left into a headwind. And then I'll throw the rock, the DX beat-in rock, for turning to the right. So it's important to understand what your disc will do. I see a lot of people throw a disc into the wind and it flips it and they fly to the next fairway to the right, and they don't understand why it flipped. And it's just basically, you know, they came from an area where there's no wind. Here in Maui, you can average, you know, about 20-mile-an-hour winds is standard. You know, so you got to make your disc selection properly. But every disc does the same thing. You know, your fairway disc and then your drivers, they all can go, you know, straight, turn left, or turn right. So you just got to make your decision on what you want to do when you're thrown into a headwind. On a tailwind, it's the complete opposite. So when you're thrown into a headwind, it makes your disc more understable, and it wants to turn to the right because of that understable. So you correct it by throwing more stable of a disc. But then when you're throwing on a tailwind, so if you're throwing on a tailwind, the wind's coming to your back, it's the opposite. So a disc that's overstable will be really overstable on a tailwind throw. So if I throw this gator on a tailwind, it wants to hook even harder than if I throw it into the wind. So when you're, you know, paying attention to the wind, you know, you got to remember when you're throwing with the wind at your back, your disc is more stable. So, you know, if you're trying to throw a disc with the tailwind, you might have to go a little more understable. Like this rock thrown into the headwind will flip, go to the right. But with a tailwind, I can throw this rock and it makes it more stable, and it'll actually fly straight for me. So one way it's flipping to the right, the other way it's flying straight. If I throw the gator into the headwind, it hooks really hard to the left, but I can get some distance. If I throw it with a tailwind, the opposite direction, it's going to hook earlier. It's going to want to have a tendency to hook earlier, so I'm going to get more distance throwing it into the headwind than I do on a tailwind. So then I'd change disc and then maybe throw the caiman on the tailwind. So the disc will come in and hook more than it would have if I threw it into a headwind. So you got to really pay attention to what the wind is doing to properly throw your disc. So always important to remember, throwing into a headwind makes your disc more understable, so you have to throw more stable of a disc. If you're throwing into a tailwind, the wind at your back, you need to throw a disc that's more flippy, because it's going to make it more stable when you throw it. Also paying attention to when you're crossing the wind. Like if you want to, you know, if the wind's coming right through here from right to left, and I want to throw, you know, across the wind, and I want to turn my disc to the right, well, an anhyzer might not be the perfect throw, because throwing a big ante where the plate is totally exposed to the wind coming this way. So all it does is beat your disc down to the ground, or, you know, it doesn't allow it to turn. You know, you're trying to get it to turn, and the wind will just hold it straight, and you'll just fly straight. You know, so you know, paying attention to what the wind's doing is very important, you know, with your disc selections. You know, trying to pick the proper disc is really hard. You kind of, you know, I've got a stack of discs that I can't throw, you know, but it's something where if you have something else you play with, you know, one guy buys, you know, one disc, and then the other guy buys the other disc, and then you swap, you know, and maybe it works better, you know, or maybe you both end up buying, you know, a pig, you know, or maybe you both buy caiman. So, you know, trying to, you know, then there's the weight of the disc. you know, like max weight 175. You know, it's so hard, you know, you kind of got to just go with your arm speed when you're trying to talk about weight of discs. We'll talk more about the weight of the disc and the disc on another video, but those do come into play. But for now, when you're throwing for accuracy, very important to pay attention to the wind. I sit out here in the park and I watch people play hole 7, which is a 400-foot hole, throws right back into the wind, and about, I don't know, 90% of the people throw it, their disc flips up and lands on the tee-off box 6. So, you know, they're just not paying attention. But that's why it's real important to throw all your discs on a field. I mean, if you have a field, like this field where I throw is great because it's a direct headwind and a direct tailwind coming right down the field. So every single disc, all I do is rip it right into the wind, and it instantly tells me stable or overstable. Then I get the next disc, throw it into the wind, instantly tells me stable or understable. You know, and I go through all, you know, you just go through all your discs, throw every single disc and just see what it's going to do. So that way when you're on the course, you know, and you're not surprised that your disc flipped. So for now, you know, just pay attention to the wind angles. The wrist is the most important part of the whole throw out of everything. If you don't have a proper wrist, you got to make sure you get that wrist correct. You know, when you walk up on the box, just think about the wrist until you get it flying every time. But I just walk up and be like, wrist down. Just stare at your wrist down, make your throw. You know, because none of it's about arm speed. It's really, I mean, if you have a slow arm speed, yet you throw with the nose down, the disc will fly the correct flight. So if you throw a disc that wants the S turn, you know, come out, turn, go forward, you got to just get the nose down. It has nothing to do with how hard you're throwing it. It has to do with just the nose down, so it'll allow the disc to fly the proper flight. So can't emphasize that enough, of just keep the nose down. You know, get that wrist down on your throw, back of the hand leads through on the snap. So, but for now, you know, we'll just try to keep going on that. We'll dabble a little bit of the styles of discs. You know, eventually I'll do some disc reviews on stuff I'm throwing. You know, one of the most understated, or the disc, the Cayman, I don't understand why no one's throwing it. Once this thing beats in, it's a complete opposite of this disc, the Rock. The Rock, you have to throw hyzer flip. The Cayman, you throw it as a force over and glide. They're like the complete opposite, but I mean, this Cayman flies awesome. I really recommend this thing. Once it's beat in, it's really nice disc. So anyways, for now, this is Michael out in Maui. Aloha.